Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. And what we're doing today is we're going to talk about engine parts for what I call a bulletproof engine. Most of the engines I build are in the bulletproof zone. The engines I'm trying to do, I try and outdo Volkswagen engineering. A lot of guys will say you can't do that, but you need to know that Volkswagen was building the people's car for the people, and things have changed a bit since then. We've got a lot more highways, freeways, higher speeds, all kinds of stuff like that. So again, we used a lot of information that we got from Porsche to do these as well, so that you end up with a better than factory engine. So, and again, they were building a people's car that was trying to be affordable. And we're not going there. We're going above that quite a bit. So that's why I say bulletproof engine for most of the builds that I do. This one's going to be a 74. I will probably never put another 69 together. It just doesn't make any sense to do one. When you can buy a 74 crank, counterweighted, 4140, 4340, for almost the same price as a 69, unless you buy a cast crank, and we don't go there. We're going bulletproof, not under spec, what the original ones were. The original crankshafts were forged steel, and they were really good steel, but they just didn't have counterweights on them. So we're going to chromoly steel, which is even better than the factory. So we got a 74 4140 chromoly crankshaft. We got 5325 chromoly rods. These are clearance rods. These have clearance built into them. Unlike the original stock ones, they will clear in a stock case. Typically, when you build a 74, you do not need to have your case machined. You need to do some work to it, but it's something I think just about anybody with a Dremel tool or a little grinder. I just use one of these little guys here, and that's all you need really. You should assemble the crankshaft, put it in here, put the rods on it. Usually I'll do that without the gears or any of the stuff on the front. And I'll just put it in there, pull it to the back a little bit so that it's where it would be if it's in there. Rotate it, and you'll see right here and right here. This isn't the case I'm using, by the way. This is just another case I had. So right here, right here, right here, right here, all the way around. You make a little notch for the rod clearance. That's about it on a 74 most of the time, but you need to check it every time. Put it in, rotate it. Just make sure there's no other places where it's hitting in the case. I do it with it assembled together with the bolts, and then I'll take it apart and I'll put it in one half of the case, rotate it, check to see if everything's close enough, put it in the other half of the case, rotate it, and make sure that there's plenty of clearance for the counterweights on the crankshaft. That's just about it. It's basically a no-brainer, okay? So even a 76, a lot of times can be done the same way, but every once in a while you'll find that they'll hit. The 74, more than 99% of the time, it's not going to be a problem. I'm not going to say 100% because there could be something. So again, you got to put it in both halves of the case. Check it, make sure there's like, 20 thousandths or something at least between the counterweight and the crankshaft or whatever's in the way. Just make sure, you can almost eyeball that. So anyway, make sure there's plenty of room, because as you think about it, the parts will expand and contract, so there might be some movement in there. Never usually a problem with 74. So anyway, 74 short rods. Now with short rods, you end up typically needing no shims or very few shims. It ends up being about the same as a stock deck height, typically. Like I say, everyone's the same, between 50 and 60 thousandths. 60 thousandths was stock, and I try and make it between 50 and 60 thousandths with this. But what you'll find out is this is always the problem when you go stroker, is you'll find out when you see the combustion chambers, your compression ratio is going to be a little higher. So with stock heads, a lot of times you want to have them step cut, which is what I got here. To keep the compression ratio from going up to like say 9 or something like that, I step cut the heads like that. And then what that does is it gives you a little more combustion chamber, lowers the compression ratio without having to put a ton of shims in there and having, say, a bunch of barrel fire. So in other words, if you have more than 60 thousandths, if you have like 60, 80, 90, whatever thousandths deck height on your piston, you're basically firing in the barrel more versus firing in the combustion chamber. And it's less efficient. So I like to try and get around the original deck height, which is 60 thousandths. I try and shoot for that. Now there's other ways to build the same engine. You can use the same crankshaft and you can go to like B pistons and 5 rods, I think it is. That's what CB Performance does. CB Performance has these crankshafts, their own made ones. They're not the same as these. They're both made in China, but they have their own people do it. And theirs are a bit cheaper than these, even wholesale. And they also sell a clearance rod set, but they don't sell the short rod. So I didn't want to go with CB Performance because I really wanted this engine to be as narrow as possible because of my fitment of the bucket truck that we're putting it in. It's pretty tight, so I didn't want it to be wider than stock and have to do a whole bunch of tin modifications. So anyway, there's that problem. Then I'm trying to solve. So anyway. So the heads are going to get all new valves because I have the valves were kind of shot that were in them. It's getting new guides in the exhaust. And I don't know if we'll have that on video or not. I also cleaned up the exhaust ports. If you look in here, I can get my pinky all the way through. A factory exhaust port on a single port head, you cannot do that. And they're very restricted on the exhaust, so it's a good idea to use this same tool and clean them up a little. It really helps a lot with the performance. So this is going to be an 1800. So we got 88 thick wall cylinders. We'll go over what that is in a minute. But I'm going to finish with this crankshaft. It's counterweighted crankshaft. So since it's a counterweighted crankshaft, what that does is the factory did not have these big counterweights on here. This is Porsche technology. This stuff was on Porsches, not on Volkswagen. So what that does is when this cylinder fires, the counterweight takes up a lot of that stress because it's firing right here and it doesn't have to travel all the way through the crankshaft to the flywheel. So when that normally fires and you don't have a counterweight, there's more stress on the crankshaft and that carries into the flywheel. So they had a heavier flywheel to make up for that. So what I like to do is a lot of guys will say, God, you're putting in a bus. Why don't you have a full-size flywheel? Well, because number one, the crankshaft's a bit heavier. So that's taking the stress away. And having a heavy flywheel as well will put more stress on the crankshaft because now it's going to put some more, because of the weight here, it's going to put more through there and go to the flywheel. That's why most guys will run a lightened flywheel when they run a counterweighted crank. If it makes sense to you, you'll understand what I'm saying, is that we're trying to make, again, a bulletproof engine. And if you put a lightened flywheel on a stock crank, they really don't work well. The engine kind of shakes a lot. When you have a lightened flywheel on a counterweighted crank, it doesn't do that. And that's because, again, it's designed that way. That's why they have these. Plus the other thing is, this one's 8 doweled, okay? And that's stronger. It's got 8 holes in the flywheel. Now I'd have to get a stock flywheel 8 doweled. Costs money to do that. It's actually cheaper to get a new flywheel. So we go that way. If you were looking at this, you wanted something like this, CarCraft sells an engine kit with everything here and then some, and it's darn near close to the price that I pay wholesale, really. So honestly, if you're going to do it, I would just go through them. It's going to be a little bit different, but it's very, very similar to what I'm getting here. So they have them on their website, CarCraft store, Again, I do not get anything from Crankshaft. There's not enough markup in their stuff. They do give me a wholesale price when I go in to see them, but that's because I've been going there for, I don't know, most of my life. But they have all the stuff at a really good price. You really can't beat their prices, even with the shipping and all that. It's really, really cheap for engine parts. Engine parts, you can't beat them. I mean, some of you guys that look at SIP1, some of their stuff's a really good deal, but engine parts, Crankshaft, it beats everybody. They have good deals on stuff at SIP1 for things like parts that, you know, are made in Europe because they're part of the Commonwealth, Canada, and they ship to the US, and it kind of makes it very cheap to buy some of the stuff through them. But engine parts, definitely Crankshaft is a place to go. One of the things I like to do is, these are Schmidt original equipment, Volkswagen. I like to go with Schmidt rod bearings. They're a little bit heavier than the Silverline, which if they don't have the Schmidt ones in stock, I'll use Silverline. But if they have them, because sometimes they don't have the particular size you're looking for. If you're going like 20 or something like that, you may not have them. But they do have standard ones, so I got a set of those. I'm going with Silverline mains. Again, a little cheaper than the Clobes. And they still work fine for main bearings. Going with Silverline dual thrust cam bearings, because they have the full thrust all the way around. When you're going performance cam, really good idea. So yeah, we're going with some stuff that's a little bit better than stock, and then some stuff we're going with is stock. We're going with original equipment, German reground lifters. These things they will last forever. Okay, this is a reground crank or camshaft that's ground to a W100 angle. Basically, they take a stock camshaft, they regrind it to the W100 grind. They only do 100 and 110. I think they don't do any others. They may do a couple others, but I'm not aware of them, so I don't know. I think they only do 100 and 110. They can't do bigger than that because there's just, what they do is they take some material off of this side and use it over here. So they grind a lot off of this end, and then they're able to still get enough profile to go that big. So that's how they do it. If you look at a stock cam, it's really, really thick on this side. So they've got a lot of material there they can take off to get the lobe to go up that high. So it works. All right, so in this thing, I'm going with this 1,700 pound clutch. May not really be that necessary, but you know, might as well go big or go home. Then we're going with, because AHA makes these and their wholesale price is really good, so you just get them. They got, you know, these get really good price at Crankshaft for these two. This here is a solid disc. It doesn't have the springs in it. And so I have that. It looks like it's got springs in it in the picture, but no, it's a solid disc. So I've got that one to go in there. So no rocket science to that, pretty simple. We're going with the 26 millimeter Shadek pump, and we're going to explain that in a second. Hopefully I'll remember. We're using hardware kit. I buy a brand new hardware kit. It's got all the bolts and nuts and all that stuff for the engine. Kind of helps when you've lost a few or something, or maybe your other ones are bad, and some I think have lock nuts on them and all that, so it's kind of nice. Goes together real good with a set of hardware kit. We're doing the 88 thick wall, and I'm going to show you guys what those are, because a lot of people don't. I've explained this several times, but a lot of people just don't get my explaining. It's better to have visual aid. But if you see here how thin this is, it's super, super wafer thin on this end. And the skirts are going to need to get trimmed, so we're going to show that later. I'm going to do it myself. I talked to the machine guys, and they're like, nah, just cut them and weigh them, and you're fine. So it's super, super thin on this side where it goes into the case. Then on this side, it is super, super thick. Okay, because what you do is you get your heads, okay, you get your heads cut to for a 90.5. So if you're ordering heads, you order heads for a 90.5, and you buy the cylinders that are called 88 thick walls, and they come like this. So what this does is this slides into a regular 85.5 opening on a case. So it slides in there, and then on the top, all you're going to have to do is change the head opening, and you put these on there. And I'll explain in a second why we're doing that, why we're going there. We're not going with 90.5s, which 90.5s will be fine. You know, I love 90.5 cylinders. It just depends on the case you have. So if you're running a case like I've got here, then you're going to want to do it this way if you want it to be bulletproof. Again, bulletproof, again, is I'm trying to get the most out of this thing as I can. As bulletproof as possible. I want it to last. I want it to, you know, take some abuse. That's the whole reason for saying bulletproof. So here's actually the case I'm going to use. The reason we're going with 88 thick walls is because this is a stock B case from 1970. They only made these in 1970. It's a dual relief case, but it had 10mm studs in it. Because it had 10mm studs, the case savers are 14mm. So if I open this up for a 90.5, okay, let's see if I can get you guys a little closer. If I open this up for a 90.5, what's going to happen is it's going to be very, very close to, if not rubbing, the case saver. And if it's rubbing the case saver or that close to it, you've lost your strength around these, okay? And if you lose your strength around these, guess what happens? It's no longer bulletproof, is it? So again, I don't like to do 10mm, 90.5, or 92s, or anything like that if it's 10mm stud case. If it's an 8mm stud, you can do it. You can go to 92s or 90.5s. But if you go to 94, you cannot go to 94. In this case, you will have half your case saver showing all the way around. So if you go to 94 on a 8mm stud, it's going to be the same problem as doing a 90.5 with this case. So two things are cardinal rules of old school Volkswagen guys is don't go 94s. A lot of guys say don't do a 1914. Do a 1904 stroker crank and 90.5s. Or do a 1968 stroker 74 and 92 thick wall. The 92 thick wall is very similar to the 88 thick wall. It's a little bit thicker than the 88, but these are really thin. So, you know, that's why another reason I don't like to have them put lots of shims on there. Because if I have a lot of shims on there, you know, the cylinder's really, really thin. It may crack or something. Don't really want to go there. So I'd rather just go with them being against the case or very close, very little shims or none. So this is the case we're going with. So we can't open that up. Well, we can, but we're not going to. You can. People will do it all the time. They'll do 94s and they'll do 90.5s with 10mm studs, but it's not a good idea. Most of your old school Volkswagens will say, no, don't do that. So why am I going 26 and not 30 on the oil pump? If you port match everything and you port match your bearings, all that stuff, you port match all that stuff, your main bearings and all that, you port match it all, and your oil pump right here, you're going to put it in there, check and make sure the hole lines up, file it a little bit, make sure it's real nice and even, straight, goes straight into that pump. You can get enough oil pressure out of a 26. Now the problem if you go 30, so you go 30 and we're probably going to go full flow. All right, I haven't got my parts yet though, so I need to mock this up and check it. If we go 30 and I put a full flow cover on it, it is possible. I don't think it really even would be. I thought when I ordered it, it might be possible for the pulley to be too close. When you put the tin on and all that, and the pulley on. So it's a pretty tight sandwich in there when you do a 30. And because the 30s, again, another, let's see, what is it? 26 to 30 with 4 millimeters. It's 4 millimeters thicker. So that pump comes out a little further. You got to put longer studs on here. And then when you put that cover on there with the oil line sticking out of it, right? It makes it pretty tight to get the tin on there and have the pulley not rub. I've had these rub. Now, in anything else, it might not be a big deal. Sometimes you get an aluminum pulley and not have an issue. But on the bucket truck, we need to have that second pulley on here to run the engine. So yeah, there's that issue there. So I just figured, just to be safe, I'll run a 26 millimeter pump. Again, I use 26s in most of my other engines. I don't have any issues with oiling. The 21 or whatever it is, there was barely enough to even oil an engine. Those things were like, might as well have slingers, you know. It was like, those things didn't have enough oil to me. I don't know. Well, maybe they did, but every time I've ever run one of those, I had issues. So I'd rather not. I just go to 26. So anyway, and that's what came stock on this case anyway. So my other option was to go with this 40 horse case and go, then I could go with 90.5s. I was going to do this originally, but I need to do some mods to this thing to make it work out. And it wasn't because I was worried about the mods not working. It's more of that I was running into this mind block as well. So this is a 40 horse that has 8 millimeter studs in it. This is a rebuild. Well, I think Brothers told me it was a Canadian rebuild. And it has 8 millimeter studs. They kind of did some weird things to them. And they also did something, he said, that they machined one half of the case. Maybe they just machined this half. It looks like it's a little bit closer here to there than here to here. So they machined half the case a little bit. Just a little bit, maybe 3/1000ths or something. I don't know. And I don't know what the purpose of that was, but they did that when they were factory rebuilds from Canada. And they stamped them with, I think, a 0 on here, O, oversized. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff on there. See, oversized. I don't know the stampings. I couldn't find out from them, but so there was that issue, was like kind of a worry, you know, that I was going to have clearancing issues, and I didn't really want to go through that right now. It's not that I won't go through it. I'll still put a 74 in this, but you know, I just didn't really just want to go through that right now. The other thing was, because of this, this is kind of the clincher, is if I did this one, I was going to go right up to 90.5. Now, if I go to 90.5, then I start to get into that the compression ratio is going to be pretty high with stock heads. That's why the AA Performance makes those heads, and the Ponchitos are made the same way. Ponchitos are definitely better heads than AA Performance, but you pay a lot more for them. The Ponchitos use a better quality aluminum, so you can weld them or whatever if you're going to do that kind of crazy racing stuff, you know, and you want to weld them and make them ports bigger and all that stuff. The Ponchitos will do that. Where the AA, you may not be able to weld them, but I mean, a lot of guys are running AA heads and have no issues with them. So I don't want you to think that they're no good because of that. A lot of street guys are running them and they're fine. I have them on my car. So the AA Performance has a larger combustion chamber. So if you're going to build an engine, you want to go up to like 1904, 1968, and you don't want to have real high compression, you might want to go to, and you don't want to have a lot of barrel fire, which, you know, 90,000 shims or something like that, or 90,000 decade, you know, that gives you a lot of barrel fire. The problem with that is it causes detonation at lower compression ratios, so I don't like to do it. So I don't know, there's a whole bunch of theories on that, but that's my theory on it. So to eliminate that, if I'm going to go to 1904 or 1968, I would rather run the open chamber heads. They have, they're way bigger combustion chamber. They come out, I think, 60 cc. Stock is typically 50 cc. I've added some cc's here. I don't know how many. We'll have to find that out later. I'm trying to get it to around 8-to-1. I don't want to have too much more than 8-to-1 pulling that big truck. So, because if it detonates, I cannot hear it in that thing at all. Or if I have it in something else and it's detonating, I can hear it. And that single cab with that lift and everything in the way, I cannot hear the engine, period. I can only hear the gear noise in the transmission. That is it. So I didn't hear a noise until when it blew up, until I started it up. When it was completely stopped, I started the engine up and I heard a noise and it was done. So, but I don't think it made any noise until I stopped anyway. I don't think it did. I didn't hear anything at all. Just heard gears. That's it. So that's why I decided to just forego using the 40 horse case and go to the other one. I'll probably build something really good with this one. It'll still be a pretty bulletproof engine. And if I full flow with a 40 horse case and bypass the cooler, that's the other thing I was going to do here. Typically, if I go bulletproof, I'll run a doghouse fan shroud and full flow the case, which is basically you take this plug out right here, you pull that guy out of there and you thread it with 3/8 pipe tap and put an elbow on here. I've already done it to that one, if you didn't see that. And then you'll put a plug in here. Some guys will put just one plug in, and guys are saying now that they got to put in two, put one in the pump and one in here. I mean, if your pump fit really tight as stock, I don't see why it wouldn't. It would leak. I think that rule is probably more for the aluminum cases, because the aluminum cases, the pumps fit a little bit tiny bit looser. So, I think if I did aluminum case, I would definitely full flow it because of those reasons. I would want that one, because the seal is not the best. I don't think on these. I noticed that with the aluminum case. So full flow, you're gonna kind of overrule all the problems you have, with that. But you should always check it. If it is a bit loose, guys will actually O-ring the pump. They'll take the pump and have it O-ringed, and then it solves the problem altogether of this being loose in the case. So it could be the reason that they do that is because the pump fits loose, and it could just be that reason. And they had a loose case, was worn out or something, and that's why they had a low oil pressure idle from running full flow without two plugs in it. So just to be safe, best to plug both of them. Plug this one and put a plug in the pump on the outlet side, and let the oil come through the passage, go around, come back, and go back in the case right here. Right? Yeah, right here, the upper one. The lower one, no. The upper one is where you want it. So we're going to go full flow case, and then because I'm running the stock fan shroud, I want to run the stock fan shroud. Again, it's for aesthetics. The original air cleaner goes on a bracket that's connected to the fan shroud. And if it's not the right fan shroud, it's not going to properly reach the intake manifold. So I want to make sure that I can use that stock air cleaner on it. I want the engine to look completely stock when you open the hood, other than the intake's going to be larger because it's a single port instead of a 40 horse. Another thing I like to use on something that's anything that's performance is the Type 3 cooling system. And, again, people will say this doesn't work. I mean, Volkswagen had a bulletin out that says it doesn't work. And we checked this stuff years ago and found out the engine definitely runs cooler with this tin on it. Head temps were lower. So, okay. what this does is it meters the air going around the cylinders to go through these passages. So it has to go all the way around the cylinder. Normally when you blow a piston, it's right between this stud or this stud. Okay, that's where usually where it goes, and this allows air to go around here and through this metered hole. And then once it maxes out the airflow through the cylinders, which is where less of the heat is, more airflow goes through the head. And then it has these two end things to help it go all the way around the head. So these do work. I mean, I don't know how possibly, just from looking at it, guys, how somebody could think that this doesn't work. Anyway, you can always comment that below why you think it doesn't work. And you can comment below why you think it does. It makes sense to me. When more air goes through the heads are where all the combustion is created. Because we don't like to have barrel fire, we're going for combustion chamber fire, right? Combustion chamber fire, with the fires happening up here, that's where the heat is. So we want to cool that part of the head as much as we can, and those deflectors will cover this portion of the head and help the air direct and go through it better. And we have these little shields on there, so we'll get as much air through those heads as possible. In fact, another good thing to do is take your heads. Again, I'm doing a lot of engine prep stuff right now, and look through all the air ports on them and make sure that they're clear. You'll find a lot of times that, especially if you got crappy aftermarket heads, if you have like the AA Performance or the Panchitos, the air ports look pretty good. I think these ones I already looked through, they look pretty good. They're pretty open. Air can get through them pretty well. So we want as much air going through those heads as possible to keep it from detonating. So I think I've covered pretty much everything and why we're using it. We're going to build a pretty strong engine here, something that will hopefully take the weight of this truck. I know there's going to be people that say, why don't you go with a 40 horse again? Because that's what it came with. Okay, listen. This truck never left mains, probably. I bet it never ever drove. It was shipped to mains, okay, and it stayed there until they decommissioned it. All right, and so it's never been on an Autobahn. It wasn't designed to go on Autobahn. It was designed just to go around town and fix lights, and that's it. So I'm driving it 50, 60 miles on the freeway. This thing's never been on a freeway ever. It only had, what, 60,000 kilometers on it? Something like that. It's never done that. It wasn't designed for that. So we're trying to over-engineer it a bit so that we can get it to some car shows without blowing up the engine. Now, this thing wasn't a virgin, you guys. This thing had more than one engine in it. With only 60,000 kilometers, it's had more than one engine. And the reason I know that is you see that little thing there? Little circle with the VW on it? That's a VW reman, factory reman case. And I can't use it because it's just so badly water damaged in the bottom. I thought about maybe figuring out a way to save this thing, but it's so badly water damaged in the bottom that it's just, you know, it's kind of cool because it's got cam bearings in it too. So when they did a VW factory German reman, they actually put cam bearings in them. It's kind of interesting. Unlike the Canadian, is this the Canadian one? Or no, it's the 10 millimeter or the BK70. But unlike the Canadian one down here, they didn't do the cam bearings. So that's kind of weird. I don't know how they must have rebored the cam because they cut the case halves. So it's kind of weird. But anyway, we are going to beat the Volkswagen engineers, okay? And we're using Porsche technology. We're using guys who have been doing this for years, information. We're using updated parts. We're using chromoly. We're going to thicker tops of the cylinders than factory. Those cylinders are way thicker than the 85.5s. So we're going above and beyond engineering of Volkswagen. And the other thing is the cams they put in these things are just ridiculously flat. You know, the cams they came with, I think they're what, 230, 224 or something like that. Lift and 224, 26 duration or something stupid like that. It was just like they were just junk. So updating the camshaft, that's why I say anytime you have your engine apart, even if you can't afford it, you can afford one of these, you guys. One of these regrounds, Engel 100, oh my God, your car will just come alive. You put that in it. You know, I mean, it's so worth it. You know, you do it once, you'll be like, oh, why didn't I do that last time? And, you know, one of those reground cams to the bigger globes really makes a difference. Engel 100, you can put that in just about any VW engine. They'll tell you it'll have a rough idle. Just turn it up a little. This thing might have a little rougher idle than I want. If it becomes too rough of an idle, I may go to the 40 horse rockers. There's a lot of options you can do. So I'm considering that. I'm just going to go with the stock 1.1 to 1, 1600 rockers. And we're just going to run it with that. And we're going to single high rev springs in the heads. So you know that that's being done, you know, and that's all we're going to do. We're not going to be putting any RPMs in this thing. This thing's going to, it's not going to like going above about 4,500 RPMs. It's going to go up to about 45 and the power is going to end. So it's just going to, and you're not going to be up there that for very long anyways. Even on the freeway, at 60 miles an hour, I'll probably be going about 38, 3,900, something like that. You know, and that's this. I figured that this will work just fine with that. So anyway, oh, we're going one cooler, 172 pass electric fan cooler, and going to bypass this one because I want to run the stock shroud and I want more air to go into number 3. Some guys are going to not like that. You should put a doghouse on. I don't want a doghouse because I've got to have that stock air cleaner. I want it to look original. So there's a lot of sacrifices you got to make. I'd prefer that if I was going totally 100% bulletproof. 2 coolers, you know, doghouse would definitely be worth it. If you're going to do that in your car, I understand that's what you want to do, but I'm not doing that only because I wanted to have that original fan shroud that was on it so that the air cleaner, the bracket, and all that works. So anyway, I hope that helped you guys understand what we're doing. I'll talk to you on the next one. Please like, share, and subscribe.